At 2:47 a.m., over the icy Baltic Sea near Sweden's Gotland Island, a Russian Kilo-class submarine, often called the Black Hole of the Ocean because of how quietly it moves, was closing in on a critical deep-sea data cable. This cable was no ordinary line on the seabed. It was part of the hidden network carrying trillions of dollars in financial activity, along with sensitive NATO communications and security data. What was unfolding was a major act of provocation, a calculated move aimed at disrupting a vital artery of the Western alliance. Inside the submarine, the Russian technical crew worked in total silence just 300 meters from the objective. They were preparing to deploy a device designed to cut one of the world's most important fiber optic links. At that depth, in the Baltic's difficult acoustic environment, they believed no NATO ship or aircraft could detect them. But they had made one critical mistake. They had failed to account for the electronic ears of the US Navy, a system that, within minutes, would turn their underwater ghost into a fully tracked target. The Russian submarine unit had just received its order from Moscow: carry out the mission, do not withdraw. But the Kremlin was about to be reminded why testing the US Navy in international waters, especially in NATO's newly expanded neighborhood, is a very risky move. At the same time, the American anti-submarine warfare network had received its own message: do not give them room to operate. This was far more than a routine military drill. It was a high-stakes geopolitical showdown where one misstep could trigger a direct confrontation unlike anything seen since the Cold War. And the stakes were enormous. With Finland and Sweden now officially part of NATO, the Baltic Sea has in many ways become NATO-controlled waters. But that shift has not happened quietly. Russia, feeling increasingly boxed in, has leaned more heavily on what analysts call hybrid warfare, targeting critical infrastructure without launching a conventional strike. The objective is not to attack warships directly. It is to disrupt the invisible economic and military framework that holds the West together. If that cable were cut, financial systems could slow, and NATO command and control coordination could become less responsive and more exposed. It would be like damaging the nervous system of a much larger body, creating confusion, delay, and opportunity. And in that confusion, Moscow hopes to gain leverage. In response to this growing undersea threat, the NATO exercise codenamed Taurus Strike was rapidly redirected toward one mission: tracking and stopping deep-sea sabotage teams. It became a very public demonstration of NATO capability, a hard warning that any hostile move, even one disguised or denied, would face an immediate response. This is the kind of contest where the threat is almost invisible. But to the US Navy, invisibility is not magic. It is a technical problem, and one they learned how to solve decades ago. If anyone believes silence alone is enough to hide from the world's most advanced anti-submarine forces, they are badly mistaken. Russia's main goal in this region is to restore influence and weaken NATO unity. The Baltic Fleet's strategy is not a direct clash with a US carrier strike group. That would be unrealistic. Instead, the approach is indirect: create uncertainty, spread pressure, and cause economic damage through deniable attacks on key underwater civilian and military infrastructure. The Kilo-class submarine, especially the improved variant, was chosen for exactly this mission because of its strong acoustic and electromagnetic stealth. With advanced anechoic coating and quiet electric propulsion, it can descend to around 240 meters and move at just 3 knots, producing an exceptionally small acoustic signature that almost disappears into the background noise of the sea. The Russians believed they had built the perfect underwater scalpel, a platform that could operate unnoticed and slip away before anyone realized what happened. That confidence came from a dangerous assumption: that NATO would stay focused on ballistic missiles, carrier groups, and large visible assets, while overlooking the hidden, shallow water undersea contest in the Baltic. To them, the Kilo represented the ideal asymmetric tool, an older but upgraded platform carrying out a very modern mission. And the danger was not just in its 53,000 to 65,000 torpedoes with post-launch target acquisition capability, but in the act of sub-sea sabotage itself. An attack without spectacle, yet one that could cause billions in damage. Moscow was prepared to let the world believe a technical malfunction or even a seismic anomaly had severed the cable, while Western leaders scrambled to understand what had happened. For the past 48 hours, that confidence seemed justified. The Kilo had managed to avoid passive sonar networks from both the German and Swedish navies. But what the crew did not realize was that the search had stopped being purely European. American assets had now entered the chain, and when the US Navy becomes part of an anti-submarine operation, the entire equation changes. What followed was a textbook example of an integrated kill chain, beginning in the air, running through digital networks, and ending beneath the sea, At 20,000 feet, a U.S. Navy P-8A Poseidon maritime patrol aircraft flew a dense search grid above the Baltic. The P-8A is far more than a surveillance aircraft. It is the central processing brain of the anti-submarine mission, a multi-sensor fusion platform equipped with the AN/APS-154 Advanced Airborne Sensor Radar, capable of scanning and mapping even shallow submerged contacts and unusual surface patterns. But in the Baltic's acoustically difficult waters, its real strength came from sonobuoy deployment. The aircraft released a carefully calculated pattern of passive and active buoys, including directional command, active sonobuoys, and DIFAR buoys for directional frequency analysis and recording. Each buoy was placed with mathematical precision, creating a passive underwater sensor net covering roughly 100 square nautical miles. That network listened for the smallest clues: engine hum, propeller cavitation, hull vibration, and then came the decisive advantage, the magnetic anomaly detector, or MAD, mounted at the rear of the aircraft. This sensor could detect tiny disturbances in the Earth's magnetic field caused by the submarine's large metal hull. Every piece of information, from sonobuoys, from the MAD system, from NATO surface radars, was immediately fused and processed through the Link 16 and Link 22 tactical data networks in near real time. At the center of this system was the USS Winston S. Churchill, DDG-81, an Arleigh Burke Flight II A-class destroyer equipped with the Aegis Baseline 9 combat system. Its AN/SPY-1DV radar did more than scan the sky. It acted as a giant electronic processing node, sorting and interpreting millions of sensor inputs every second. That is where American strength became clear. The P-8A provided the ears and the nose. The Churchill served as the brain, and the Swedish and German frigates below acted as the ready hands. This is what true sensor-to-shooter, multi-domain warfare looks like. The tactical action officer aboard the Churchill, Commander Evelyn Hayes, did not need to wait for verbal confirmation. She could already see the Kilo not just as a possible sonar contact, but as a distinct magnetic track on the Link 16 data feed from the P-8A. The Aegis system had already calculated a firing solution and pre-selected a RUM-139 Vertical Launch Anti-Submarine Rocket, or ASROC, from the ship's Mark 41 launch cells. This system is designed to launch a supersonic delivery weapon carrying a Mark 54 lightweight torpedo, capable of traveling about 10 nautical miles before releasing directly above a hostile submarine. That capability is exactly why Moscow's confidence was about to collapse. At 3:02 a.m., the Kilo-class submarine reached the operational position above the subsea cable. Inside the control room, Captain Romanov gave the order: prepare to deploy the mini-charge. He felt the tension, but also the satisfaction of a mission that seemed to be going exactly as planned. But at that exact moment, everything began to come apart. 1 minute later, aboard the P-8A, the undersea warfare sensor operator called out, "High confidence contact, large magnetic anomaly signature, Kilo locked." The MAD return matched the submarine's profile perfectly. At the same time, acoustic data from the passive DIFAR sonobuoys picked up a single, extremely small sound, the faint click of an external valve opening as the submarine prepared to release the cutting device. That information was packaged and transmitted over Link 16 in just 0.2 of a second. At 3:03:30 a.m. aboard the USS Churchill, Commander Hayes stepped back from the console. Target confirmed. Confidence 98%. Kilo is in position to conduct sabotage. Plausible deniability is over. Request transition to decisive interdiction status. She did not wait for additional approval. The procedure had already been cleared in advance. 15 seconds later, the first shock reached the Kilo. It was not a strike. It was disruption. A nearby Swedish A-26 Gotland-class submarine, operating as part of the exercise, launched a powerful acoustic jamming device directly above the Kilo's position. It was not meant to destroy the submarine. It was meant to overwhelm it. The sound wave effectively blinded the Kilo's sonar and passive listening systems, flooding them with interference. At 3:04 a.m., confusion broke out inside the Russian boat. Their hydroacoustic systems were no longer giving useful returns, only a wall of noise. Captain Romanov shouted for a status update. Before he got one, a second message arrived. 16 seconds later, the USS Churchill launched a warning demonstration. Not a live ASROC, but a targeting solution shot designed to send an unmistakable signal. From the Mark 41 vertical launch system, a training RIM-162 evolved Sea Sparrow missile, stripped of its warhead but configured to transmit highly precise GPS localization data. launched skyward at Mach 3. It followed a cruise missile-like trajectory, clearly demonstrating that the Aegis system already had a complete firing solution. Moments later, the missile splashed down in the immediate vicinity of the Kilo. No explosive payload, no ambiguity. Then, directly overhead, the P-8A dropped a line of 6 active sonar buoys. They immediately began broadcasting a barrage of powerful sonar pings into the water. For the Kilo, the era of silence was over. The underwater quiet they had depended on was gone, replaced by the unmistakable reality that they had been found, fixed, and publicly exposed. The entire hull began to vibrate. Then Captain Romanov looked at his console and saw 3 new contacts appear, active sonobuoys sending out strong acoustic pings. In that instant, he understood exactly what it meant. They had been detected. But what came next was even more unsettling. A single ultrasonic data burst arrived through the sonobuoy network from the USS Churchill. It carried one coordinate, the exact location of the Kilo. Along with it came a short, cold digital warning. Target locked. Disengage immediately. Failure to comply will result in escalation. The coordinate matched the submarine's own inertial navigation data with an error of less than 5 meters. At 3:05:30 a.m., Romanov stared at the chart and understood the truth. They were no longer invisible. They were trapped inside an acoustic box. The training ESSM launch had already made the point clear. Aegis had a precise solution on his position, and if that launch had been something else, the outcome could have been final. Romanov took a breath and gave the order. All stations, abort mission. Retreat at flank speed. He had blinked first. What was supposed to be an invisible operation had ended in a very public and deeply embarrassing failure. The aftermath of this brief 2-minute and 15-second encounter was immediate and significant. The Russian Kilo was forced into a hard acceleration and sharp turn, shifting from a near-silent 3-knot crawl to a 17-knot retreat. That single move changed everything. Instead of remaining nearly undetectable, the submarine now became dramatically louder underwater, wiping out any believable denial Moscow might have hoped to preserve. Captain Romanov chose the safety of his crew over the destruction of the cable. It was a rational decision, but tactically it was a clear defeat. The US Navy and NATO had done more than stop a sabotage attempt. They had also collected a major intelligence prize. The Kilo's acoustic signature at 17 knots under the exact water temperature conditions of the Baltic was now fully captured by the P-8A, the Churchill, and supporting Swedish and German units. That data is extremely valuable. With it, NATO sonar networks can more quickly recognize and classify that same submarine in future operations, even in difficult and noisy waters. Moscow said nothing. There was no official response, no convincing explanation, no denial that carried weight. The image was too damaging. A submarine known for stealth, approaching undersea infrastructure in secret, only to break contact and run once exposed. For Moscow, the cost was humiliation and the loss of deniability surrounding one of its most important undersea assets. The Kilo, often promoted as a black hole beneath the sea, now had an acoustic fingerprint recorded in NATO databases with unmistakable clarity. For the US Navy, this was a calm, professional win. They did not need to destroy a $300 million submarine to make their point. They only needed to prove that they could locate, track, and hold it at risk with exceptional speed and precision, all within 90 seconds of target confirmation. And that is exactly what they did. This was not only about defending a cable. It was a broader demonstration of Western technological coordination and operational reach. Commander Hayes and her crew returned to normal patrol posture, and life aboard the ship settled back into routine discipline. But everyone involved understood one thing: the Baltic Sea would not feel the same after that night. A message had been delivered. The biggest lesson from this short but intense encounter was not the speed of a missile or the movement of a submarine. It was the seamless integration of the U.S. combat system. That is the real warning for any future adversary. The age of quiet, deniable hybrid pressure begins to break down when it meets American multi-domain operations. Whether a threat hides under the sea, moves through the cyber domain, or operates beneath the cover of darkness, the U.S. network is built to detect it, track it, and demonstrate a complete response option before the target fully realizes it has been found. The Kilo-class submarine revealed an uncomfortable reality. No stealth advantage lasts forever when faced with the combination of high-speed Link 16 data sharing and the centralized processing power of Aegis. And this is not about one destroyer or one aircraft. It is about the larger NATO warfighting network functioning as a single connected system, one that makes isolated hostile actions far harder to pull off successfully. This operation once again highlighted the central role of the U.S. Navy in maintaining strategic stability. It was also a reminder that security is not preserved through complacency, but through preparation, discipline, and the ability to dominate a confrontation before it spirals further. Now that the Baltic has effectively become NATO-controlled space, the signal to Moscow is hard to miss. Hidden pressure will no longer stay hidden, and silence at sea may be answered by the most powerful message America can send: the quiet certainty of systems that already know exactly where you are. How do you think this incident could influence Russia's future strategy in the Baltic Sea? Leave your thoughts in the comments and tell us which military technology face-off you want us to break down next: the F-35 fighter or China's newest hypersonic anti-ship missile. See you in the next video.